from classics to children's books. You never know what she's gonna cook when Gretchen makes novel moms.
Alright, so it's a Novel Moms. What? It's been, I don't know, like 2 years maybe? Oops. Yeah, you know, life happens. I've changed jobs. I have a different job now, which is great because they're paying me more money and I can have a little bit more freedom, so that's fun. But I also bought a house with my husband, and so I have this huge kitchen now to make all kinds of yummy things for you and more space to do it in, and I'm very excited about that. I got some new dogs. We'll see them later probably. They'll be wandering around. But I have been missing this so much, and I keep saying I'm going to do it, and my husband keeps saying you should do it, and everybody keeps telling me they miss it, and I miss it too. So I'm back. So hopefully this is a thing, people. If you like it, if you want to see me keep making videos, put some comments or some stuff below, just so I don't feel like I'm just talking to myself. Now, if you're new to Novel Moms, or if you're not new, whatever, just to recap, my main premise when I started this was to talk about books and talk about food. And I still want to talk about books, but I don't want to be like a slave to having to present a different book every week. So maybe I'll just tell you what I'm reading and the kinds of stuff I'm reading, and we'll make some yummy food, and whenever possible, those things will intertwine. Please tell me what you're reading and maybe some things you think I should be reading or cooking, and I'll see what I can do. All right, let's get started. So today I'm going to be making, it's kind of the end of summer, people are going back to school, and I want to just make something that's easy to take for lunch, whether you're a high schooler or a person who has a job and has to adult every day. Something that's delicious. You can eat it cold, warm, etc. It's also really good for you, high in protein. Oh, that's the other thing. I've also become a vegetarian somewhere along the way. So this will be vegetarian, but I will give you tips at times of ways you can add meat into these dishes, and or not, if that's not your thing. But this is a delicious kind of end of the summer meal. It's good zucchini pie, and it's amazing. I made it for a family get-together recently, and it was really, really a big hit. So this is something where you can use those end of the summer vegetables and have this just delicious, wonderful representation of summer on your plate. So the first thing we need to do is make the crust of the zucchini pie. Now, you can totally use, what the recipe I actually found originally used was a tube of those crescent rolls that are buttery and amazing and delicious. But I'm trying to cut back on carbs and stuff. Use the crescent rolls if you want. You just open them up, like put them in one like thin layer on the bottom to make a pie crust in the bottom of your pie pan. Put them in the oven, bake it for like 7 minutes at the same direction that the tube tells you to bake it on. Take it out, let it cool down a little bit, and then you put your filling in. But we're gonna make something it's a little bit trendy right now. And I experimented a little bit with not a ton of success, but this recipe is a winner. And what it is we're gonna make a crust out of cauliflower and cheese and eggs and deliciousness. But again, if you don't want to use cauliflower, you don't have to use wackadoodle cauliflower. But if you're cutting back on carbs or you're gluten-free, this is the way to go. You know, and you can also just not do a crust at all. I've had crustless quiches before, which is kind of sort of what this recipe is based on, though not as heavy on the eggs. Up to you. We're going to do the cauliflower crust. And the beautiful thing is this recipe, you can use it to make breadsticks, to make pizza crust, whatever you want to make like a flatbread for, you can use this for. So it's amazing. So what we need is two cups of cauliflower crowns, which basically means these beautiful little pieces. So I'm only going to need half of this. This is an old trick. So I cut the cauliflower in half, like this. You can see the core of the cauliflower. And I'm going to cut, using my knife, around the core. And then I can just pull it out. You're not going to be able to get all of it, but you can get most of it. Save you some time. And then there's cauliflower for the dogs. Then, once I have it broken up, what I need to do to the cauliflower is cut all of the stalks off, and then we're gonna dice it up even finer. Because essentially what we want is the cauliflower to be like a rice consistency, so smaller pieces. That way when it gets soft, it's easy to kind of meld in with the rest of our dough. I'm doing this a lot. And it won't seem so much like cauliflower in the end. Because we're not trying to fake people out unless you're a 4-year-old that won't eat your peas, or a 45-year-old that won't eat your peas. Now that I've got the majority of the stalks off of my cauliflower, I'm just left with the florets, or the top part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my gigundous knife. Can I tell you that when I watch a show where someone happens to be cooking, especially it's a cooking show, but it's a show in general where they're cooking and they use a knife like this to chop things, and they're going like this and they're chopping. Use the knife that fits the job. If you're just cutting up a little bit of something, a little bit of, garlic, use a tiny little knife. But if you're cutting up a bunch of stuff, use a big papa, grandma. Here's what I'm doing. I'm gonna take my cauliflower now, and I want to rice it. I really need to stop with the air quotes. All right, and I'm just gonna go like this. And this is what we call a rough chop, just to get us started. Notice I'm keeping my fingers up, not like this, not like this. I'm gonna not chop off your digits. So I'm just gonna run my knife through this now until I get that rice consistency, no big chunks. So we've got our rice that is just into tiny, tiny little pieces, and I need 2 cups of it. So what we're going to do next is we're going to use a contraption in your kitchen that maybe you don't use a lot anymore. I hardly ever use mine, but we're going to use the microwave. So because the cauliflower already has water in it, most vegetables do, we don't need to add water to this, but we want to cook it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it with a plate, so we have a nice sealed thing, so it'll steam in there in its own fluids. Is that gross? For 10 minutes. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to prep some of the stuff for the filling. And right now I'm just going to dice an onion really, really, really finely because I don't like big chunks of onion. Man, these need to be sharpened. So I told you I've been listening. I told you what I've been reading lately. A young adult novel. It's called Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. Somebody had told me to read her books, and holy crap, they're amazing. It's so funny because I think young adult gets a bad rap as not being intellectual or good, but I think it's some of the best writing that's going on right now. I've also been trying to learn some stuff. I don't know if I was doing this before, but I have been doing improv comedy. I perform every weekend at an improv theater, and so I'm trying to learn more about different genres and things so I can use them in my performance. And I've been reading a book called Understanding Comics, which is amazing because if I was ever a comic book reader, but it takes the idea of comic books, puts it in a graphic novel format, and it teaches you about that genre. Really, really good. What are you reading? What's going on out there? What's in your Kindle, in your book, on your iPad? We can also prep some other stuff. I've got some fresh summer corn that I just spewed the silk everywhere. So we're gonna give the summer corn prep. It's some beautiful summer corn from the farmer's market, and it is just lovely and delicious this time of year. And all I'm gonna do, because if you remember when you were a kid and your mom said, go peel the corn, and you had to sit there on the back step in the heat, and you're dying, and you're just peeling off each individual piece of husk. It takes forever, right? Here's what you do. Cut off the end part, not the silk part, but the end part, the handle, like so. And now you take one chunk off here, like you normally would, and then here's the amazing thing, is then all you have to do is roll it right out of the husk. Ta-da! Saves a lot of time, saves a lot of mess. So if you're trying to get away from your family at the picnic, I told it, understand. You go peel it any way you want. I'm going to cut the corn off of the cob. I'm going to cut it off the cob and I'm going to cook it with the onions. Just a few moments ago, my cauliflower came out. So you notice that it's a little bit smaller because the water has evaporated out so that it can cook it. Yeah, it smells like cauliflower. Not very exciting. Soft, you know, pliable to be almost kind of mushy, but not like mush. And now I'm going to need some eggs. But before I get some eggs in there, because you don't want the eggs to start cooking because the cauliflower is still a little warm, and that's why I'm stirring it to kind of get some air in there and cool it down. I'm going to add in some cheese. Now the cheese is what binds it together with the egg. You don't need flour, you don't need any of that other stuff. And so then the cheese is cold, so the cheese will kind of hopefully cool that down a little bit. It'll start to melt, but that's okay because we're going to cook it. Cheese, mozzarella cheese. Mozzarella because it's a nice, like, that stringy cheese, so it will hold things together very nicely. Also because it doesn't have a super strong flavor. If you have a cheese that you love, you know, use cheddar, use whatever you like. Cheddar I think would be great as the crust for this. I'm also going to add in just some salt. I usually just do this by eye, but I think it's about a teaspoon of salt. Probably about the same as pepper. So I mix that up. The next step is to put in the eggs. So now it's a little bit more cooled down. I'm going to put in 2 whole eggs. I've got 2 eggs in there. I'm going to mix that up. You just want the yolks to be dissipated. They're not, you know, not just big chunks of yolks in there. Also going to add a little bit of garlic. All right, next we're going to put this into our dish. This is a little bit challenging because normally this is used as a pizza crust, so it would be flat, and so we're going to kind of shape it into our pie dish. And then I'm going to take our mixture and just dump it into the bottom of our pie plate, which you may or may not notice says apple pie on it. I'm just going to start to work this into my dish. Just working up the sides as much as I can because of gravity, because the dough is wet. It's not a typical elastic dough. At least not yet until we bake it. It's not going to go all the way up, but it's going to give me a nice basis for that zucchini and delicious filling. And I'm just going to pop this in the oven for 25 minutes. Before we move on to the next part, which we're going to cook some stuff on the stove, I want to show you this glorious, wonderful thing. These are like 45-year-old copper pots. Well, most of them are. These are from a different set, but all these copper pots are from a 40-year-old set that a friend of mine has had that was never opened, that I got for a steal. And they're the most amazing thing to cook with. I was so excited to get them. And my husband installed this glorious pot rack for me. Choose a large, flat pan because remember, when you saute things, you want them to be as spread out as possible. If they're lumped on top of each other, they're not going to get that gorgeous brown color. They're just kind of going to steam, and you're not going to get that same delicious caramelization. I'm going to add some olive oil to the bottom of my big, giant, flat skillet. If you have a big frying pan, that'll work too. And if you don't have a big one, just do it in smaller batches. That's fine. You just put them aside as you cook them. All right, so I'm going to wait for that oil to heat up in my pan. So I'll usually just toss a couple of onions in it. If they start to sizzle right away, you know it's hot enough. Again, I want to get them nice and brown, not burn. Get some good color on there, and then I'm going to throw that corn in there. I'm going to tilt the corn in the pan and apparently all over the counter. If you notice the pan's a little dry, don't be shy if the pan is dry. Put a little bit more olive oil in there. I'm just going to also add a little bit of salt. You know, they say that you can always, you know, adjust the seasonings after it's cooking a little bit by adding maybe some other things to balance it out. But if you don't cook with your seasonings right from the start, your food is not going to taste the way you want it to taste. If you throw it in at the end, it's not the same as when it really kind of seeps into the goodness of the flesh of the vegetables. All right, so let's take our cauliflower crust out of the oven. It's all cheesy and it's nice crust-like consistency. It's got a nice firm texture. I'm going to put this aside to cool. And now what I've also done is I put a few tablespoons of butter, real butter, in the bottom of my skillet here. The same one that I used for the corn and the onions because it's got all those good little juicy bits of wonderful things on the bottom of the pan. So I'm going to use that to kind of get up all the little pieces of onion, corn, any of that caramelization that I left on there so it doesn't get wasted. And I'm going to add in about 4 cups of some zucchini. So I'm going to get a little bit of summer squash in there. I'm going to Just move it around, get it all coated in the butter, and cook it till it's got a little bit of caramelization, a little bit of brown on there, and deliciousness. And then we'll combine it with all the other things and finish our zucchini pie. Now it's time to make the filling. I'm just going to put in that corn and the onions that we sauteed earlier. Add 4 eggs. You don't need to do anything special ahead of time to them. You don't need to whip them up or beat them or anything. This is mustard seed, organic mustard seed. I'm going to add just about a teaspoon of that-ish. But what you can also add for a little bit of different flavor, that some people like a little bit more for a little tangy, is some Dijon mustard, about like 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard instead. Some pepper, a couple teaspoons of that, some salt, maybe a teaspoon and a half of salt. And from my garden, this fresh basil. This other thing that I've been doing here is gardening. Though I tend to pull a lot of dead things out. I'm still working on the whole gardening thing, figuring out, but basil I can grow apparently. I just took a bunch of beautiful fresh basil leaves and I'm just going to roll them up, kind of like a cigar. I'm going to chop them a couple of times lengthwise so that when I chop them this way, I get little pieces of this gorgeous basil. I am speaking into the rhythm of put that into my glorious mixture. I'm going to save just a little tiny bit for the top for a little bit of color. Put that aside. Remember when I said I'm working on the gardening thing? This was the size of the first bell pepper I got. It's tiny, but I'm going to use it. I'm just going to chop it up and put it in there. This beautiful zucchini that I just cooked in butter. Gorgeous. I'm just going to dump it right into the mix. Okay. All mixed together, and I also have a cup of Monterey Jack cheese. You could use sharp cheddar, you could use more mozzarella if that's what you have. It's really up to you. Whatever flavors sound good to you, you could put feta in there. The beauty of this cheese, this kind of cheese though, is it's gonna melt nicely and it's gonna kind of hold everything together nicely along with those eggs. Our glorious crust. And I'm just going to take the filling and just start spreading it on top of our cauliflower cheesy crispy crust. When it cooks, it's going to get this goldeny color because of the cheese in it. OMG. Put some of that fresh basil in there. Okay, now we're going to pop it in the oven at 375 for 20 to 25 minutes. Once it starts, you can notice when it stops jiggling and it gets that beautiful golden, like brownish, cheesy color on top. It's ready to go. So here is the finished product. It's golden and amazing. You still get that beautiful color of the red from the peppers and the yellow from the corn, and you've got the green and the basil on top and the brownness from the cheese. It would get even more firm if you let it cool off a little bit, but we want to eat it. So firm schmirm. Look at that. What? I'm gonna eat it. Hot. Oh my god, it's really good. Like you really do get that cheese, you get the garlic. You can even taste the butter that we used to cook the zucchini with. And all those gorgeous vegetables, and the corn adds a little bit of sweetness. Salty, sweet, creamy. Just every texture and flavor you want for your summer food. And this would be great served with like a fresh salad and a cool glass of lemonade. I'm really happy to be back. I'm really happy to be eating this. And I'm really hoping that you guys enjoy this episode, and we're going to perfect this and get back to figuring out all the awesome stuff that made Novelnoms great before, and we're going to make it great again. And I love you guys. See you next time.
From classics to children's books, you never know what she's gonna cook when Gretchen makes Novelnoms.